And welcome back to Mark McIntyre's Minds That Matter. I'm here with Mikhailo Stevenson-Klein, futurist, pioneer thinker in virtual reality systems. We'll add that for you. Virtual space. And just before the break, we decided to, in this segment, discuss something that is of interest to politicians, lawyers, educators, business individuals, entrepreneurs, and that is the question as to whether or not virtual systems, or virtual space as you like to call it, Mikhailo, whether or not it is outpacing public policy. And this is, ripped right out of the news press yesterday. High Court upholds affirmative action. Oh, that's not the one. Campaign Watchdog Eyes new internet rules. Campaign Watchdog Eyes new. This is the Fair Practices, Political Fair Practices Committee of the State of California Assembly. And they are revising the rules for Twitter and Facebook and MySpace, all those social networking, because when these laws of fair practices were written 30 years ago, nobody imagined Twitter. Nobody could imagine MySpace or Facebook. What is your take on this? Is it the case that we are just so far behind the curve legally and in public policy that technology is always going to be out in front?
That's an interesting question, and it's, in one sense, technology is always going to be out in front. On the other hand, all civilized society regulate behavior. They restrict behavior. There's standards of acceptable behavior. And online, people act badly in virtual space just as they do in the real world, and there is a need for regulation of virtual space. In addition, although most of us, we think of virtual space as the internet as being this fun environment, nevertheless, it does have a darker side. Online bullying, slander, identity theft.
People committing suicide because of
the number of movie and pop stars in Korea that have committed suicide after secrets or photos were revealed online is absolutely shocking. So, I don't know. We can tut about different problems, but when we finally get to the problem of suicide, the number of suicides, this is something that we need to address.
You have written and discussed at many points. You have written that, in your view, we have no further right of privacy. That right of privacy is pretty much gone because of the emerging technologies that can. They're not regulated.
Well. Socially, we still believe in a right to privacy, but in actuality, online, it's a universal space.
Yeah.
Anything, you're under a microscope. Anything you can't say can be used against you, can and will be used against you.
It used to be that the definition of a public person, I'm now a public person, so anybody could, because I'm on the radio, right? So I'm a public person. If I wrote an article, let's say, for a magazine, I would be a public person, or a movie star would be a public person. But now, everyone is a public person. Everybody on Facebook is now no longer a private person.
That's correct.
So if somebody does something to them, their ability to sue under the law is enormously restricted, is it not?
Yes, and I think, it's tough. If you were to tell an inappropriate joke, somebody put it on YouTube, you may have trouble ever finding another job. Well, we looked online, and we saw some of the things that you said. And we don't know if you're a good fit for our company. So I think this has a potential to be a bad thing for society. If we look at anthropology and history, if we look back at different cultures and we look at cultures in which do not have privacy, they're generally characterized by suspicion, intrigue, drama. Think of living with your evil mother-in-law. This is what societies without privacy tend to be like. This isn't something we want.
Okay, so we know that the problems are there. We also know that government, with the big G, will want to regulate and will want to control, because that's the nature of government. The government is interested in power. Whether you're Republican or Democrat or Independent or Tea Party, I don't care who you are. If you're a politician, you're interested in power, not necessarily principle. All right? And if that's the case, here's the question for you, Mikhailo. Can government regulate virtual space? Ought it to regulate virtual space? Two questions.
So can and will or should
Should,
government
yeah.
regulate virtual space?
Right.
I think if we look at contemporary issues today, suicide, online bullying, I think there clearly is a need for the regulation of virtual space. How that is accomplished is a topic of debate. We could look at corporate regulation. Corporations attempt to regulate the internet and through terms and condition of use. And yet, it seems that when you sign terms and conditions of use, you're signing away your basic rights. Yet, when we go into virtual space, do we lose our constitutional rights every time we log onto the internet? Well, clearly not. This suggests a role for the government. Yet, many people feel that if you give the government your hand, they will take the arm. So this raises a number of interesting questions. There are a number of governments around the world who have attempted to regulate the internet.
All right. Now, just a technical thing here, because I am stupid about this, and I suspect that if I'm stupid about it, maybe some other people are as well. How physically can governments regulate a virtual space like the internet? Let's just take the internet as one example. Physically, how do they do it?
Well, I think there are a number of examples. We could look at Malaysia. We could look at China. Let's look at China. In China, the government attempts to regulate the internet almost at every level. You have software on your computer, which monitors where you go. Your ISP blocks access to certain sites. The firewall, the Great Firewall of China, blocks access to Western sites. At every level, the government blocks, spies, checks, edits. In fact, they will even go in and send you an edited version of the New York Times. So
I don't think people realize that that software exists to change the word regime to nation.
Sure. So if you're reading the newspaper in China, online, of course, an American newspaper, and the newspaper said the regime in Beijing, that will be changed to something a little bit more palatable. So it's very interesting. In addition, the government, for people that don't follow the rules, there are penalties. And you see that in China. You also see it in Europe, where people are terrified to download illegal files because getting caught, it's expensive. It's painful. Even in the United States.
In China, you could actually wind up with a bullet in your head.
Well, if you were...
seditious.
Yeah, if you were talking about politics, you might get yourself in trouble. So, very interesting topic. I think... If we want to look at a solution, clearly the government wants to control the virtual space. Clearly, corporations want to control this virtual space. Yet many people are uncomfortable with it. They suggest, can we not use education or use social regulation? I think there's one last possibility, which is regulation through design. And this is something we're already familiar with, although we're not really aware of it. Digital rights management would be an example of using software to control what you can do. So we may be able to regulate, or another example, one of my favorite examples is the shutter sound on a camera. Now, in Japan, I don't know, people, well, I don't want to get myself in trouble here, but we always have the image of using your camera and taking a picture down a schoolgirl's skirt. Why did they put a shutter sound on a camera? So people know that their picture is being taken. That would be an example of a technological solution that does not require government intervention.
But in terms of also education, I think people younger than you even, and the generations below you, which I think there's only one or two, they now grow up in a world where they realize that not only if they step out of their house, should they be aware of the fact that they can be photographed, and probably are being photographed many, many times during the day, at the bank, at the grocery store, at the skate park, at the gas station, at whatever. But even in their house, they are self-regulating and self-restricting in that sense. We're going to be bringing this question back into focus after we take a very short break. I am Mark McIntyre, and this is Minds That Matter, and we'll be right back.